Surviving ADX Florence, America's toughest prison. There's a place in America where silence is the loudest sound you'll ever hear. A place where sunlight feels like a privilege, and human touch is a memory that fades year by year. They call it ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. A supermax prison so secure. Even the guards say they feel like inmates. Inside these walls live the most dangerous men in the United States. Terrorists, cartel bosses, serial killers, and traitors. But here's the truth no one likes to admit. The hardest part of surviving ADX isn't the isolation. It's what isolation does to you. Every hallway is monitored by motion sensors. Every cell sealed by concrete and steel. You can scream until your voice breaks, and no one will ever answer. Inside this fortress, madness isn't a risk, it's a guarantee. In this documentary, we'll step inside the lives of those who've lived the impossible. Men who survived years without sunlight, without touch, without freedom, and somehow, against all odds, came out alive. Welcome to ADX Florence, the place built to destroy the human mind. The fortress in the mountains. If hell had an address, it would sit in the heart of Colorado's high desert, just outside a quiet town called Florence. Population, less than 4,000. From a distance, it looks like nothing more than a cluster of low buildings surrounded by mountains. But up close, it's something else entirely. Razor wire, concrete walls, a double ring of electrified fencing. A place designed not for rehabilitation, but for containment. ADX Florence was opened in 1994, born out of fear, vengeance, and political pressure. The early 90s had seen a series of prison uprisings, deadly riots, guard murders, and organized gang warfare. Even America's most secure prisons couldn't contain certain men. So the government decided to build something new, something absolute. They called it administrative maximum. A title that sounds clinical, almost bureaucratic. But behind that language hides a reality far darker. Here, the idea wasn't just to keep prisoners inside. It was to break them from the inside out. Inside ADX, everything is measured. Every step, every breath, every meal, controlled down to the second. Cells are 8 by 12 feet, barely large enough to stretch your arms. The bed, desk, and stool are made of poured concrete. There's a slot in the door for food. A window 4 inches wide, angled toward the sky, so you can never see the horizon. No horizon, no freedom, no escape. Even the architecture itself plays tricks on you. The hallways are curved, so you can never see what's ahead. There are no blind corners, no shadows, no chance to hide, for inmates or staff. Every move you make is recorded. Every sound echoes against concrete walls until it disappears into nothing. They say you can feel the control in the air here, like static. It's in the way guards move, silent, rehearsed. It's in the smell, bleached metal, recycled air. And it's in the looks, eyes that don't linger long. Because in this place, eye contact can be dangerous, even if there's a wall between you. But ADX wasn't built for the average criminal. This is where the system sends those who defied it or embarrassed it. Men like the Unabomber Ted Kaczynski, the Boston Marathon bomber Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, drug lords like El Chapo Guzman, spies, terrorists, gang leaders, each one locked behind 1,000 tons of steel and concrete. And yet, for all its strength, the most dangerous thing inside ADX Florence isn't the prisoners. It's the idea that once you're sent here, you stop being human. When the gates close, names disappear. Men become numbers. And numbers fade into silence. But somewhere inside those concrete walls, there are still whispers. Stories of survival. Stories of men who refuse to break. And one of those stories is about a man named Marcus Reed. Marcus wasn't a terrorist. He wasn't famous. He wasn't meant to end up here. But the day he arrived at ADX Florence, he became a ghost in a world built to erase ghosts. The arrival. Marcus Reed had been to prison before. County jails, state pens, places that smelled of sweat, cigarettes, and bad decisions. But this was different. It began with silence. No sirens, no shouting guards. Just the rhythmic hum of a government van cutting through the Colorado desert. He sat shackled from wrist to ankles, A black had drawn over his head, breathing through fabric that tasted like dust and fear. They told him not to speak. They told him not to move. They didn't need to tell him not to look, because the hood made sure of that. When the van stopped, a voice barked, "Inmate 39814-067, move." He stepped out onto gravel, so cold it bit through his shoes. Even with the hood, he could tell the air was thin, sharp mountain air, a place far away from everything, from anyone. When the hood came off, the first thing Marcus saw wasn't a guard or a wall. It was a tower, tall, narrow, concrete gray, watching him like a god. And beneath it, the gates of ADX Florence. He'd heard rumors in the pen. They said this place made men forget their own names. They said no one ever left the same. Some said no one ever left at all. A female officer scanned his wristband, typed something into a console. He was stripped, searched, scanned, and scanned again. Every item he'd ever owned, gone. Even his prison clothes were replaced by something else. A thin, faded orange jumpsuit. No pockets, no strings, no zippers. Nothing he could hide. Nothing he could use. Then came the briefing. A voice, monotone, recited the rules. You will spend 23 hours a day in your cell. You will have 1 hour of recreation. Alone. You will speak only when spoken to. You will not look at staff longer than necessary. You will not make noise after lights out. You will not cover your window. You will not forget where you are. And then the officer leaned closer, his voice a whisper beneath the fluorescent hum. Welcome to ADX Florence, where even time stands still. Marcus was led through corridor after corridor, each quieter than the last. The walls were smooth concrete. No graffiti, no stains, no marks of humanity. Every door looked the same, heavy gray steel with a slot at chest level. Behind each, a man who hadn't touched another person in years. As they approached his cell, he heard it, a single muffled sound. A scream? A cough? A prayer? He couldn't tell. It echoed once, then vanished, swallowed by the building itself. Marcus stepped inside. The door closed behind him. The kind of sound you feel in your ribs. The cell was smaller than he imagined. Concrete bed, concrete desk, concrete stool, a toilet and sink combined in one metal fixture. A window, too small to see the world. Only the sky. A strip of blue so distant it could have been painted on. He sat on the bed. It was cold. The air barely moved. He could hear his own heartbeat. And that's when it hit him. The realization. The truth that breaks every man who comes here. He wasn't in prison anymore. He was in the box. A world within a world. Designed to erase him piece by piece. For the first time since he was sentenced, Marcus didn't think about freedom. He didn't think about family. He thought about sound, because there wasn't any. Not a cough, not a step, not a whisper. Just silence. The kind of silence that eats you alive. That night, Marcus tried to sleep. But in a place like this, even dreams feel like contraband. The cell that breaks you. Days don't begin in ADX Florence. They just restart. There's no sunrise to tell you time is moving, just a flicker of a fluorescent bulb above your head, clicking on with mechanical precision. Every morning, exactly at 6 a.m., a metal tray slides through the slot in Marcus's door. Oatmeal, powdered milk, a slice of bread, so dry it turns to dust in your mouth. He eats in silence. He uses the plastic spoon they give him, the kind that bends if you hold it too tight. Then, exactly 15 minutes later, the tray disappears. And with it, the only human contact he'll have for the next 23 hours. There's no schedule beyond that, no work assignments, no yard duty, no conversation. Just existence, measured by the hum of air vents and the ticking of his heartbeat. In ADX, every sound becomes a message. A flush from a distant cell might mean another inmate's awake. A scrape could mean someone pacing. A clang might be a warning or a hallucination. After a while, Marcus couldn't tell the difference. He learned that isolation plays tricks on you. The first few days, it's boredom. By the second week, you start talking to yourself. By the third, you start answering. He counted bricks, cracks, seconds. He made up games in his head, imaginary decks of cards, fake dice rolls, conversations with people he'd never meet again. Sometimes he'd whisper a joke just to hear his own voice, but the echo always came back slower, warped like someone was whispering back. His recreation hour came once a day. A guard would cuff his wrist through the slot, chain his waist, then lead him to what they called the yard. But the yard wasn't a yard. It was a concrete box with a great ceiling. You could see the sky, but not the horizon. You could hear the wind, but not freedom. Marcus would walk in circles, tracing the same lines in the concrete until his ankles ached. He used to think the fresh air would help. It didn't. The air smelled like metal, recycled, filtered, dead. Once, he looked up and saw a bird flying over the grate. Just a blur of wings, gone in a second. He stood there for the rest of the hour, staring at the hole in the ceiling, wondering if the bird even noticed him, if it could sense the desperation rising off the concrete below. Back inside his cell, time dissolved again. He stopped keeping track of days. The only changes came when the lights dimmed slightly, a signal that night had arrived. He'd lie on the concrete bed, staring at the ceiling, counting breaths. Sometimes, he'd hear distant voices through the vent, one inmate praying, another singing, one just screaming until his throat gave out. The guards never intervened, not unless blood touched the floor. Marcus learned that the worst punishment wasn't what they did to you. It was what they stopped you from doing. No touch, no smell of the outside world, no rhythm to the days. Even pain started to feel like a privilege, something real. After 6 months, he began to feel like his cell was alive. He swore the air vents whispered at night, that shadows moved when the lights flickered. He wasn't sure if it was madness or memory, but it didn't matter. Here, madness was survival. There's a reason psychologists call ADX Florence a clean version of hell, because everything works perfectly. The doors seal without sound. The lights never fail. The cameras never blink. It's a place where the system runs flawlessly, and the soul slowly stops. By the end of year 1, Marcus didn't think about escape. He thought about endurance. Not how do I get out, but how do I last one more day? And somewhere deep inside, he realized that the prison wasn't trying to kill him. It was trying to make him forget he was alive. The inmates of legend. After a while, Marcus started hearing stories. Not from guards, they didn't talk. Not from visitors, there weren't any. But through the air vents, encoded whispers, fragments of conversations that drifted through the ducts like smoke. One voice would say, "The professor's losing it again." Another would whisper back, "Nah, he's writing his manifestos on toilet paper now." Marcus didn't understand at first, but slowly he realized something. He wasn't alone. He was surrounded by legends. Dark, infamous, terrifying legends. 2 cells down from Marcus was a man they called the Professor. His real name? Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, a genius turned hermit turned terrorist, who'd once waged war on technology with homemade bombs and handwritten essays. Now, he spent his days in silence, scribbling equations on the walls with the tip of a plastic spoon. Guards said he never spoke, not once. But sometimes, late at night, Marcus swore he heard a voice mumbling through the vent. Long, slow sentences, like someone teaching a class in the dark. If you listened too long, it started to make sense. If you listened longer, it didn't. Across the corridor was another name whispered like a curse. Ramzi Yousef, the mastermind behind the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. The man who tried to topple the towers years before September 11th ever happened. He designed his bombs using a laptop in a hotel bathtub, and now he spent 23 hours a day staring at nothing but gray walls. They said he'd stopped talking to humans years ago. Now, he only talked to God, or maybe to himself. No one could tell the difference. Then there was a cell rumor to hold Richard Reed, the so-called shoe bomber, and one that once held Zacharias Moussaoui, the 20th hijacker. Names that once sent fear across the world, now reduced in numbers and echoing footsteps. But there was one name every inmate whispered differently, with fear, with respect, or both. El Chapo, Joaquin Guzman Lora, the drug lord who tunneled his way out of every prison Mexico ever built for him, until he arrived here. ADX Florence, the place even he couldn't escape. Marcus never saw him, of course. No one did. But everyone heard the story, how the guards doubled their patrols, how they even poured concrete under his bed to prevent tunneling, how his food was hand-delivered under multiple cameras. They said El Chapo spent his days pacing like a tiger, muttering names, plotting futures that would never come true. And every time someone new arrived, the rumor spread again. El Chapo's planning something. He's got men outside. He'll find a way. But Marcus learned something from these legends. They weren't gods. They weren't devils. They were ghosts, trapped by the same silence, the same gray walls, the same endless nothing. Their power ended the moment the door closed behind them. Some went insane. Some found religion. Some just stopped trying to be anything at all. One inmate was said to have refused to speak for a decade. Not a word, not a sound, until one day he began screaming nonstop for 12 hours. They dragged him out unconscious, and when they brought him back, he never made another sound again. To Marcus, these weren't just stories. They were warnings. He began to realize ADX wasn't a place that punished crime. It was a place that punished existence. Every name he heard, every legend, every infamous monster, was proof that no matter how powerful you were outside, inside ADX, you were just another man staring at the same crack in the wall. Still, the stories gave Marcus something he hadn't felt in months. Connection, knowing there were others, even if they were monsters, made him feel less invisible. But that connection came with a price, because the more he listened, the more the voices started whispering back. And in a place built on silence, voices can be dangerous. The rules of survival. In ADX Florence, there are no gangs, no alliances, no violence you can see. But that doesn't mean there are no rules. Marcus learned that early, from the vents, the same vents that carried whispers from cell to cell. They were the arteries of the prison. How inmates bled their thoughts, their fears, their strategies into the dark. Over time, he began to recognize patterns in those whispers. Tiny fragments of wisdom passed from one broken mind to another. They called it the code of the box. Rule 1. Don't think about time. If you start counting days, you'll go mad. You'll start replaying what year it is, what month, what date, until the numbers eat you alive. So Marcus stopped keeping track. He let time dissolve. Rule 2. Move, even when there's nowhere to go. He walked circles in his cell every day. 87 steps one way, 87 steps back. He did it until his knees ached and his heartbeat felt like a drum, because motion meant rhythm. And rhythm meant he was still alive. Rule 3. Talk to something, even if it can't answer. Some men spoke to their toilets, some to the vent. Marcus spoke to the walls. He named them. The back wall was Frank. The ceiling was Sky. And the wall with the tiny window, that was Hope. It sounds insane, but naming the walls gave him control. A reminder that even in a world built to erase you, you could still define something, even if it was just concrete. Sound of slow tapping. Rule 4. Don't look too long at the light. The fluorescent bulb overhead never turned off completely. Some inmates stared at it until their eyes burned. They said it was to feel the day, but the psychologists called it light fixation syndrome, a slow, creeping way for your brain to surrender. Marcus learned to close his eyes when he prayed, not for forgiveness, but for darkness. Rule 5. Never beg the guards. The moment you start pleading for a letter, a magazine, a moment outside, they know they've got you. And once they know that, they don't have to break you. You'll do it yourself. But the most important rule was the one no one said out loud. Find one thing that's still yours. For some, it was a song they hummed under their breath. For others, it was a memory. For Marcus, it was a piece of paper. Just one. He'd hidden it inside his jumpsuit when he was processed. A fragment of an old letter from his daughter. It had only 3 words left visible. Still love you. He read those words every day until the ink began to fade. Then he rewrote them in his head, over and over, until he could see them when he closed his eyes. Survival in ADX wasn't about strength. It wasn't about loyalty or fear or violence. It was about control. The tiny slivers of it you could hold on to before the walls swallowed you whole. Once, a psychologist came to his door, a woman in her 40s, clipboard in hand, voice clinical. She asked, "Mr. Reed, how are you feeling today?" He stared at her through the slit in the door and smiled. "Still love you," he whispered. She wrote something down, nodded, and left. That night, Marcus laughed for the first time in months, because he realized something she never would. He wasn't answering her. He was reminding himself he still existed. And for the first time since arriving at ADX, Marcus wasn't just surviving. He was winning. But every victory in ADX comes with a cost. Because when you find a rhythm, the prison finds a way to break it. The guards and the watchers. Every prison has two kinds of inmates. Those who live behind the bars, and those who hold the keys. At ADX Florence, the guards call themselves the Watchers. It's not an official title. It's what the inmates named them first. Because in this place, that's all anyone really does. Watch, wait, endure. Each shift begins before dawn. Guards arrive through a maze of checkpoints, metal detectors, scanners, ID verifications. A ritual of security that takes nearly an hour before they ever see a cell. Their radios crackle with codes and unit numbers, never names. Because in ADX Florence, names are dangerous. Names mean connection. And connection gets you hurt. Most of them don't stay long. 2, maybe 3 years before they transfer or burn out completely. The turnover rate here is higher than almost any other federal facility. Because what they see, what they hear, never really leaves. One former guard, known only as Officer Hale, once described it in a statement. It's not like other prisons. You don't break up fights. You don't chase escapees. You just exist in silence. The men you watch, they don't move, don't talk. You start to wonder who's actually being punished. Inside the control room, they monitor every movement through cameras and sensors. They can open a cell door from half a mile away with a single click. They can track the exact heartbeat of an inmate through motion detectors embedded in the floor. It's precision, it's efficiency, it's control. But it's also dehumanizing for both sides. Some guards start talking to cameras, like they're people. Others leave notes on monitors to remind themselves the men inside are still human. And a few stop caring entirely. They walk their routes like ghosts, staring straight ahead, reciting shift codes under their breath. Automation has replaced empathy. Marcus noticed it too. Every day, a different pair of boots walk past his cell, never stopping, never slowing. Sometimes, the same pair would appear at night, standing silently outside his door for a moment too long. He didn't know if they were watching him or making sure someone still knew they existed. There was one guard, though, different from the rest, a man named Officer Daniels. You could hear in his voice when he gave commands. Not cold, not cruel, just tired. He'd pause at Marcus's door sometimes, clear his throat, and say, "Everything all right, Reed?" Marcus would nod, though Daniels couldn't see him. Then he'd say, "Keep your mind moving. That's the trick." And walk away. It was the first kindness Marcus had heard in over a year, and it made him realize something the system didn't intend. Even the guards were looking for connection. Even the watchers wanted to be seen. But kindness at ADX is fragile. It breaks easily. One morning, Daniels didn't walk the rounds. Another officer took his place. He never returned. Rumor said he quit after finding one of the psychologists cry in the hallway, saying she could still hear the walls breathing. Rumor also said Daniels was seen weeks later in a bar in Florence, drinking alone, facing the direction of the prison. Whichever was true, Marcus never forgot him, because in a place where humanity is forbidden, even one human voice can echo for years. But the watchers weren't the only ones observing. In ADX Florence, there's always another level of control, a silent presence that sees everything, even the guards themselves. Surveillance rooms stacked with screens. Cameras inside the cameras. Digital logs that record every heartbeat, every motion, every hesitation. And somewhere, in a small office beneath the administrative wing, a handful of government analysts monitor the data. They're not guards. They're not psychologists. They're not supposed to intervene. They're there to study. What happens when you isolate a human being for years? What does the brain do? When does it stop? When does it break? Marcus didn't know it yet, but he was one of those case studies, a living subject in a long, quiet experiment. And every minute he spent staring at the wall, someone was recording the result. Inside ADX Florence, everyone's being watched, even the watchers. The price of control. There are two kinds of prisons in America, the ones that hold your body and the ones that take your mind. ADX Florence was designed to hold both, but in its perfection, it exposed something the system never meant to reveal. That control has a cost. Marcus Reed spent 15 years inside that concrete tomb. 15 years without sunlight, touch, or sound. And when the day finally came for his release, they said he was rehabilitated. A model inmate, compliant, silent. Pause. Wind fades and softly. The guards led him through the same corridors where it had all begun. But this time, he didn't look at the cameras. He didn't flinch at the buzz of the locks. He just walked, calm, still, empty. At the final gate, Officer Daniels was there, older, grayer, eyes sunken from years of watching. He handed Marcus a paper bag. Inside, one pair of jeans, one shirt, one bus ticket. No words, just a nod. Marcus stepped outside. The air was thin, cold, but it smelled real. He looked up at the mountains, the same mountains he dreamed about through a 4-inch window for a decade and a half. And for a moment, he felt the sun touch his skin. It should have felt like freedom, but it didn't. It felt unfamiliar, because that's the truth about ADX Florence. You don't walk out the same person who walked in. You leave quieter, slower, like the walls are still inside you. In interviews, officials call ADX Florence necessary, a place for those too dangerous, too violent, too far gone for anywhere else. But they never talk about what it does to the people inside. The inmates, the guards, the doctors, the janitors, everyone touched by its silence. For some, ADX is justice. For others, it's torture. But for the men who've lived there, it's something else entirely. A place that proves a human spirit can survive even when stripped of everything. Or that maybe, just maybe, some prisons were never meant to be survived at all. Inside ADX Florence, no one escapes. Some just learn how to live with the walls.